Hi there, I'm Mrs. Irvin, and we're continuing our exploration of winter. And I'm going to show you a picture of an animal, and I'm wondering if you've seen this animal before. This is a white-tailed deer, and they are all over the place in New Hampshire. They're not always easy to find, but I was just wondering, I was thinking about this specific animal because I was wondering about how animals survive in the winter and how they make it through when there's big storms like the one that I'm showing you right now. This is a snow that was falling just a couple days ago in my yard. How do animals like this make it through a big storm? I get to come inside. I might go outside and play a little bit in the snow. I might ski or snowshoe, but then I come back in and I eat food that I get from the grocery store, and so my life is quite different. So I'm wondering, what is going on with the white-tailed deer in the wintertime? So I would like to invite you to imagine you're a deer during this time of year. So you could think about that video. What if you were a doe, which is a mother deer, or a fawn, a younger deer, or a buck, and you were out in the woods? I want you to think about that for a few minutes. And I want you to think about, what are the challenges you might face, and how do you think deer are able to survive in the winter here up north in this climate where we have this winter season? So if you could do a few different choices. If you could meet with your parents or a family member and just sit and maybe have a cup of tea and talk about what your questions might be. What are you wondering about deer in the wintertime? Another thing you could do, you could just take a piece of paper and pencil and write out some questions. You could make a video of yourself speaking with your questions. One thing that scientists do is they always start off any kind of study or research with just kind of maybe a big question, and then from there they start to get more and more questions, and they might focus in on certain areas, whatever, depending on what they're researching. So I want you to be like a scientist and ask some questions. If you are at school, you could have your teacher put a piece of chart paper up, and you could raise your hands, and the students could come up with questions. So whatever situation you're in, you can always participate in this activity. So I'm going to be back here when you are ready, so you can take as much time as you need. If you need to wait and do this in a few hours, you can just pause the video now, and when you are ready, you can come back and we're going to talk about questions again. All right, now I'm back, and I actually wrote my questions on paper, and then I decided I would put them on this whiteboard so that you could see them. I talked with my son and daughter. They're actually off in college, but I just asked them about what they thought, because we see a lot of deer actually here in our yard. I talked to my sister, Mary Beth, who lives in New York, and she gave some questions, things she was wondering about. We like to hike and walk together, so we talked a little bit about deer. And so these are the questions I came up with. I wonder if my questions are similar to your questions, or if we have any that are the same. I was very interested in why do I see them mainly at dawn, in the morning, and at dusk, and not as much during the day? How do they stay protected from the snow and cold? I was very interested in that. How do they find the food they need to stay alive when there doesn't seem to be much to eat out there? I don't see the grass that I usually see that they're eating in the summertime. How does the snow affect their lives? Does it help them to survive better? Does it make life harder for them? Are deer especially good at some things? We were just kind of wondering that. How are deer different in winter than they are in summer? And how can I tell if a deer has been somewhere if I don't see them? So are there some signs in the woods I can look for? What kinds of homes do they live in? I come home at night and I go to sleep in my bed here in my house. What do they do? I know things, birds often have a nest they live in, or they might live in a tree, a hole in a tree. Woodchucks often go in a burrow. I'm just wondering about deer. I just hadn't really thought about that much before. And then why do some deer have antlers? I was just kind of curious about the antlers. All right, so we're gonna take those questions and I have my board here and I am interested in finding some answers. And one way to do that would be to go outside and explore a little bit. And another way would be to read some books you might get from the library. You might look on some websites. But what's really exciting is that we have an expert on deer that lives here in Durham. His name is Dr. Peter Pekins, and he teaches at the University of New Hampshire. He is a wildlife ecologist, so he knows about deer, and he's studied moose and fisher and martens, and he has a lot of knowledge. So today he agreed to meet me. And we were gonna explore in the woods a little bit and find out the answers to some of my questions. So come along. I hope you enjoy this video. He's going to share what he knows and hopefully it will answer many of your questions.
Okay, good morning, kids. So you're all out enjoying the snow and so are we today. But sometimes a lot of snow can cause a problem for wildlife. And so today we're going to talk about white-tailed deer and how they survive through winter. And the amount of snow we're in is not of great concern to deer yet. We have approximately 10 inches out in the open, and you're probably all sledding down Wagon Hill, having a good time. But what we can do is do a few measurements and walk around and look at some sign in the woods of how deer actually cope with winter, and then talk in general about what they need and how things change over seasons. We're out in the woods and we're in a mix of hemlock trees, which many of you probably have around your house, and big oak trees. And we are in an area of the state where oak and hemlock are quite common. And hemlock trees, and you'll see later in the video, provide great cover for deer in that there's a cover above them, just like if you held a blanket above yourself, it would protect you from the snow. And we'll do a couple quick measurements here and show you how actually there's very little snow under the hemlock trees out here, which helps deer. And I want you to imagine that there's not 10 inches of snow, but there's 2 or 3 feet of snow. And these trees can reduce the snow depth by up to 1/3, or 3 foot of snow in your lawn could be 2 feet of snow under this tree. And that makes a big difference to deer because the average deer's back is about where I'm holding my hand. So a lot of people go, oh, the deer's really, really big, but they're not. Most deer only weigh about 140 to 160 pounds. And 18 inches is where their belly hits the snow. So that's 1.5 feet of snow. So I want you, next time there's a big storm, to walk through the snow up to the crotch of your pants and then tell me how much fun you're having. And that's what the deer have to do every day. So we're going to take film of some deer trails where deer pack down the snow for easier movement. We're going to take film of where they're digging for their food, and in this case acorns. And we're going to film the difference between snow depths underneath some of the canopy. So as we turn the camera here, we're just going to show you that underneath this very large hemlock tree, I'm going to measure the snow depth just with a ruler, that simple, and we have 2 inches and 3 inches and 4 to 5 inches. And then later, when we're out of the woods, we'll measure out in the open. And I'll tell you right now, there'll be 8 to 10 inches. So about half as much underneath this tree. There are plenty of deer tracks in here, and we're going to move and find places where they're digging acorns. So hemlock trees provide the cover, oak trees provide the food, and you've all picked up acorns in your lawn or at school or whatever, and that's primary food for deer if they're available. Okay, so we're just stopping here a second. I want just to look out through and all these fairly large hemlocks and how little snow is actually in here. Remember, there's 10 inches of snow out in the open, and you can see my entire boot here in the video. And so again, it's only 2 to 3 inches of snow here. There's deer tracks everywhere. They're moving through here. So now we're going to go find some large oak trees that tend to grow with hemlock and show you where the deer are eating in here. Okay, so as I promised, we'd find some oak and some deer feeding sign here. So I'm standing next to this just gorgeous, huge old oak tree. And as your teacher, Miss Irvin, will show you, then you can see the hemlock in the back. And so the cover's in here, the food is interspersed within the cover for deer. And then when she shows you down below, you'll see all the leaves out in the snow, and this is the deer pawing to just paw acorns off the ground. And in my hand are remnants of acorns and where they've chewed those husks. And so those are scattered everywhere. And this is, again, the value of this area is that it has plenty of hemlock cover and it's got a lot of food. And Miss Irvin is going to pan around the other side, and you'll see even more farther away where the deer were falling in there.
It's like kids were playing.
Yeah. And maybe some fawns were playing.
Yeah, that's great. So the deer all came here and had their meals.
And just like you understand your home and what mom's got in the cupboard or dad, these deer know every square inch of where they live. They know where the cover is. They know where the food is. And they've been coming here for weeks, months actually, since October when these acorns fell on the ground. And this was a very big year for acorns locally. Some of you probably were playing with them. You watched the squirrels in your backyard. But these acorns are very high in energy, high in fat. And although we all try to eat healthfully by not consuming a lot of fat, for wildlife, this is really the best food they can find because they get so much out of it, and it's concentrated in one place so they can go bed under the hemlock, come out, consume lots of acorns, and go lay down again.
I've heard this about deer knowing a lot about their area and their home kind of turf, and that's very interesting. So you said something about cover, and I wonder, do you mean cover from the cold or cover from the predators, or what kind of hardships do the deer have in the winter?
So if we pan up and look up into the oak tree, those bare branches don't provide cover. And so when we look at our hemlock behind, the green, so that cover, what happens when there's a big storm is that intercepts the snow. And actually, we see snow in the branches still. And
so it kind of holds it there.
It holds it there, and believe it or not, a lot of that snow actually evaporates. So although 10 inches of snow came from the sky here, the reason is that falls out of the branches that are held temporarily, compacts when it falls, but lots of it actually evaporates. So that's why there's much less snow underneath the cover. And we tend to think of the evergreen trees or pines and hemlocks. And hemlocks are much better because of the configuration of actually the leaves on branches, and that's the green part even on a conifer tree. They're very flat, so they tend to intercept the snow. And pine trees are not, they're like a paintbrush, and they don't hold the snow as well. So hemlock locally is the best cover for deer if there's lots of snow. If there's not much snow, then deer don't really care. Very cold weather, they will get under that cover, just like you would rather be in an igloo than sitting outside at night if it's really cold. They get out of the wind, and there's less what we call radiative heat loss under here. So it's just having something over yourself that kind of holds the heat around you. And it seems like, and it still is cold out here, but when you see the the hide of the deer, they literally do not get cold. It is really about how long winter lasts until spring comes, and or they can be very mobile and get to most any food they want. But it's really they're waiting for spring, and that's when they're going to have their fawns in early June and lots of lush growth, and that's when they grow. And they're just growing to prepare for the following winter, and they're going to lay down lots of fat. And deer are very unique in that a large adult animal, 25 to 30% of their body weight could be body fat. And of course, none of us really want to do that ourselves, but that's how the animals survive, because that fat, as they lose weight, counteracts their lack of food in winter. And so it's a seasonal cycle. And we all live in a seasonal environment in New England, and we have our 4 seasons, and all the wildlife have adaptations to survive in that.
Well, that was pretty exciting hearing Dr. Pekins, an expert, talk about deer. I learned a lot, and some of my questions are answered at this point. I am still coming up with more questions, but one thing that was really interesting to me was that deer are really good at something and many things, but one thing they're good at is knowing every square inch of their home range. So they really know where the food is, where their trails to walk are, where there is cover. So they are experts at knowing everything about their kind of home range or their area where they spend their time. So I thought that was really neat. Wasn't that cool seeing the acorns that they were digging at? You could see the snow. They dug through the snow, they dug through the leaves to get at the red oak acorns. And he said there's really good food for them in the winter. So that was exciting, learning about what they eat. I also have something I can look for when I'm out in the woods. I might be able to find a place where they're feeding. That was really obvious with it all kind of the snow moved aside, that's where they were eating. So that's something to look for, even if I might not ever see a deer when I'm out walking. Another thing I thought was really interesting was that the snow really seems to be the problem for deer. So deep snow is hard to walk through, and they get very tired, and that is really something that is a big obstacle for deer. So it's not necessarily the cold. The cold might be a little bit hard for them, but it's really the deep snow. So I liked his idea of going outside and just trying to walk in a place where it's never been plowed or shoveled, and see how tired you get. And that is an experience like what a deer experiences when they're in deep snow. So those were pretty exciting things to learn about. What I'm interested in, as we were talking at the food area, I was talking with Dr. Pekins, I said I really was interested in knowing where they settle, where they might make a home. So he said, let's just keep exploring and see if we can find where these deer that have been eating, where they might have spent the night. So here we go, trekking in the woods. You can take a break now. If you're tired, you can pause the video and come back another time, or you can keep going with us. We're gonna head deeper into the woods and look for this deer home.
So we've been walking through the woods here, and you can hear the cars in the background, which just shows you how adaptable these animals are. But we're in very heavy hemlock cover, and if we look down, we're going to see here's a bed. So the deer laid here. Here's another bed. Here's another bed. Here's another bed. Here's another bed. And you'll see that even though it's not really all that cold out, that when they lay in the beds, they don't actually melt out all the snow. And that just shows you how insulative their hair coat is. They don't lose a lot of body heat. So they're able to curl up in the snow and basically be in a little igloo. And I have seen, in my deer research days, have seen deer actually dig out semi-igloos and lay down in them. These were deer that we released into the wild, and they'd allow us to almost live with them. And it was quite amazing to see that instinctually they knew to get out of wind and to create cover. Now we're going to pan up and you'll see I'm standing next to this huge hemlock tree. And if we pan up, you'll see that you can hardly see the sky. And that's the cover that's provided by all these hemlocks in here. And that's why the deer are bedded in here. They're very secure. And they've just adapted to listen to the occasional car go by at night. You know, my guess is they're bedded here at night, and they walk over and eat a bunch of acorns and bed again. And where they are in the day, we're not quite sure, but because we're near the road, we're not going to push around too much, just in case they're bedded somewhere nearby. Looking here is the beginnings of what we call a winter deer trail. A number of deer moving through here. You see all the pellets on the ground and the tracks, and basically they're coming in and out of cover to eat and lay down. And as winter progresses, this will become more and more packed down if we got more and more snow. And they'll basically almost exclusively use these same trails day in and day out, just because they pound it down like you walking on a plowed sidewalk. So this is what we call an old buck rub. So you'll see the cast antler, and if we look closely, we can actually see where a tine actually dug into that wood. And so the male marks his area he lives in, and more than one male could work this. They're not by definition territorial. Many males share the same area, and yet they mark and they leave a visual mark. There is scent here so that each deer understands and they know the other deer by scent. There is a general relationship between the size of the tree that the rub is on and the size of the deer, and also the height of the rub. So this is actually a pretty big tree to rub. So this is a mature buck doing this.
So it was right here, rubbing against it.
He was walking right here. We're right on that winter trail, and again, it's probably a very seasonally. It's a trail used, quite often, and they'll mark this. And within this general area, I know of 3 or 4 other of these that I found. So again, it's a method of communication among the males to rub the trees, and then there are other ways that they communicate as well with the females.
So this is something we could look for when you're walking in the woods.
This is absolutely
like
fun thing to look for, and then they tend to be along movement corridors or trails, and they tend to be at the edge of fields that deer come out to. If you know how those deer come in and out of those fields, that's where you'll find these. And then along how they move through their home range, they will mark that. And deer are very habitual how they move. It's not random how they get through the woods. They are always on the same trails. Hence, when you find one rub, the next year you'll probably find another one nearby. Okay, all right, so we've just been out in the woods, and now through some body parts we'll talk a little bit about how deer survive. And we did look at the beds and talked about how the beds aren't even melted out because of how thick the coat is. And basically it's like you wearing your heavy winter coat and playing in the snow. And you don't melt the snow around you, and the same thing is for these animals. And so I'm just going to get up a little closer, but you can see when I go like this how thick that hair is. Now this coat is from very early November, so it's really not done growing, and these hairs about a little over an inch, could be up to 3 inches long on a really older animal. And the outer hairs are actually hollow, and so that acts like insulation. And I think of something good here, like in your wall. If you've maybe you watch your parents insulate a wall or something, and insulation works by having air inside it. It's that's the most efficient way. So basically, air's trapped in between the hollow hairs, and that air then acts as an insulative layer to keep body heat in. It's really not about keeping cold out, it's about keeping their body heat in. And so all animals that are active in winter have incredible incredible fur and pelts, and the same for birds, have very thick feathers, and it's again to keep their body heat in. So the one thing about deer is they shed twice a year, and so this winter coat will be shed in June, around June, late May, June. And the new coat in the summer is very reddish, a dark red, and it's very thin, and it's so they can actually let body heat out when they get hot, because they're kind of big animals. And then this coat will start growing again in early September, and then be completely done by late November, December. Now, one other, we did look at the what we call buck rub on the tree, where the male marks that tree. And so antlers are a new set grows every year. So right now is when deer are dropping antlers. It's really late December through January, and a few will hold into early February, but mostly by mid-January, most deer have dropped these antlers. And you can see the bottom. That's actually part of the skull actually lets go, and then that heals over on the head of the deer. And so this has become great sport for people to go out and look for sheds now, and to make art objects and so forth, and even more so for moose. Now the new antler starts growing in April, and it's covered by what we call velvet. It's very sensitive to the touch, and that's because the body's sending all kinds of nutrients to grow this. An antler is actually bone, and so it grows like your bones grow, except that this one shuts off in September. And then antlers are not weapons. They're used for display, and basically this deer would go, my antler's bigger than you, and he'd stand up tall, and he'd hold this antler up and look at another male and try to convince that other male to leave if there was a female around that he was going to breed with. So although you read about antlers being weapons, it's very, very rare, and they're really display mechanisms, and that's why they're so they fall off in early winter. So
We are finding more interesting things about deer. It's interesting how they have two different coats. They have a summer coat and a winter coat, and how the winter coat really helps to keep the warmth in. Sometimes I think it's protecting from the cold, but it's really blocking that warmth that's inside the body from leaving. And that's kind of interesting how the hairs on the deer in the wintertime are hollow, and that is extra insulation. They also have kind of a real thick layer. And then in the summer, their coat turns kind of a reddish color, and that helps to it's a different kind of coat. So they lose their hair, and then new hair grows in. And that, in the summer coat, lets the heat out. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I just wonder if you ever can see a deer, they're kind of have partial, like a part red coat and a part gray coat, if they're in between. Or I'm going to look at deer a little bit more in the kind of in between seasons and see what I notice about that. So I keep getting more and more questions. I hope you do too. Antlers are really bone. Wow. Okay, I never knew that. And they fall off every year. So right around now, most bucks, the male deer, have lost their antlers. So he said it's kind of a sport to go out and look for antlers in the woods. So people like to do that and then make some pretty things with them. So that's kind of interesting. So excited to keep hearing more things about the deer, and I hope you're getting some of your questions answered. And let's continue and hear a little bit more.
okay, so Mrs. Irvins asked me, how did I know to come out here? And so I, just to give you a little background, I've been studying deer since the 1970s here at UNH. And we used to have captive deer at UNH. We're one of the few universities actually in the country or the world that had captive wildlife. And part of that was we actually trained deer to walk just like you walking your dog on a harness and leash. I had deer that were trained to tolerate us to walk with them in the woods, and then you can observe these animals. Now, between that and just spending a lot of time outside, which I encourage you all to do, I knew that there would be deer here just because I'm familiar with their ecology and what they're going to do this time of year, if not all year. A deer, and really any animal, understands all the resources in what we call their home range, where they live. In there is the water they need, the food they need, and the cover they need. And it's not random where any animal is, so that's why we talk about a term called habitat. And so these deer, I know they're going to eat acorns, so I look for big oak trees, and they actually like certain acorns more than other acorns. And I used to have a tame deer that we walked on a harness and leash, and she would throw a fit if she couldn't find white oak acorns. And yet, once she decided there weren't any, she'd eat red oak. And that's because there's a taste difference. You yourself could pick up a white oak acorn and chew it and enjoy it. Well, you might not enjoy it, but it wouldn't taste bad. But red oak acorn, you'd spit out. So deer have physiological ways of dealing with kind of what we call chemicals in those foods that make them taste bad. And so there's learning. Animals learn from their mothers. They learn, particularly deer, the adult females really teaching the young everything. They accompany that adult female into an area like this to survive the winter. And next year, all those young animals will be back here. Being in science is a great career, and studying wildlife is really living the dream, I can tell you that. And so it's been 35 years here that I've been teaching at UNH and enjoying things like this and helping teach college students, and now you. And maybe I'll have a new career and come teach at the elementary school.
All right, I'd like to thank Dr. Pekins for spending some time with us, and I'm so glad that you spent the time with me today. And I hope that you can continue your learning about deer, and maybe you could make a nature journal page about something you saw or something you noticed, something you're wondering about, something that reminds you of something else. You might go out into the woods and look for some of these things. You may or may not see deer, but you might see signs of other animals. And that's what scientists and researchers do. They ask questions, they're curious. They go out and make observations. They write some things down. They keep records. You might even put down the date and the time of when you see a deer or something. That's just going to help you to learn more about the world. So keep learning. You can go to your library and get some books on deer or other animals. And I'd love to hear about what you're learning and discovering.